Seth and I are going to call the meeting to order because everybody's still talking. Nobody's paying attention to us, important people. There, I got to start.
Do we have the whole, we don't have the whole committee of six, right? Chum is not here.
Yeah, you're missing one.
You guys are all here, so just Chum. Chum, he sometimes rolls in if he gets out of Brattleboro in time. We're on, but I think we're gonna get started anyway. I'm not sure if we have an official agenda or just to sort of start communications, and are we gonna invite our superintendents to share what work they've done so far?
So I put, Stephen, we'd started with an agenda. I just did a rough agenda because I thought we should just, we had some minutes, the note taker took some minutes, which basically just said we talked. And then my thought was is we would just kind of see where we're at now and where we want to go, and do we, in which direction are we going to go in, or could we go in, and is there any stomach for talks about combining districts? I kind of thought, and then, you know, we had the paperwork that you guys, you're studying from last meeting. We had the thing that Stephen and Chris worked on when Chris first became your superintendent. And I thought maybe we kind of talked about it last time, but we didn't review it.
No, we didn't.
And I wonder if that's something we maybe want to just kind of go over a little bit more in depth and see what places there are for us to work together. But I just want to say one thing, and I'm glad Emily's here, and so she'll correct me and smack me upside the head if I'm wrong. But I think, you know, what Act 46 is looking for is not just for us to work together more, but for groups to become a single entity. You know, and if you look at all the different options, the side-by-sides and the supervisory districts versus supervisory unions, there isn't anything like at Wyndham Central where we've worked together for years by having our agency fund items. And, you know, those of you familiar with Wyndham Central, you know, like we'll share a gym teacher, a music teacher, and they're a central office employee, but each school that utilizes that position pays their share. And that's kind of what Act 46 was some of that. They thought there would be some savings and the ability to maintain a better program because you're not, I remember when I went to the Reedsboro meeting that Chum had set up, somebody had spoke about the fact they couldn't hire a gym teacher because it was only a 1 day or 1.5 day a week position. But what we need to look at is that we can't just work together and say we're going to, you know, combine some resources. They think Act 46 is actually looking for a very formal union or a very formal joining of the forces. And is that everybody's kind of understanding of it? Is there anybody that would disagree with that? And so I think the first thing, you know, we kind of got to answer is are we in the process, or do we think that we may want to look into a very formal joining, which is more than just, you know, us saying that we're going to work together? It would be that, you know, we would become one governance model of some sort, and you know, it would be something that has to be presented to the voters. And if that's nothing anybody's willing to do or to look into, understanding that that's where we would have to go, then you know, I don't know if it's really, there's much that we can do. And it's his meeting.
I'm sorry. Can I add, well, just my perspective on this? What this meeting is not Act 46, in my opinion. It's a follow-up on a committee that was previously appointed to fulfill the requirements of a grant to consider a joint SU, or collaboration with 2 supervisory unions. And that really falls back to Act 156. So that when you said that if we had to have a vote, or we had to decide something formal, have a vote of the public, that's not true of 156 regarding SUs. It is true regarding Act 46 regarding joining boards, school district boards, but not at the SU level, interestingly, because we have an example north of us, 2 Rivers, that had 2 supervisory unions that did a study, took it farther than what we did previously here, and came to forming one new supervisory union, combining those 2 previous previous Black River and Green Mountain, I think were the names of them. And they joined to make the new supervisor union, Two Rivers, which has one superintendent and has one board, supervisor union board, has a whole lot of member districts. And that was voted on by the two SU boards and approved with a plan for implementation transition. It took at least a year and a half. So I just make that distinction.
Does that satisfy the requirements of Act 46?
Yeah, Act 46 does not retract anything in 156. In 156, Emily can correct me too, but that's my understanding of the distinction between these two kinds of initiatives. Now, you could treat this one under Act 46 and talk about individual school districts all combining, but that requires the vote of each town.
So then, that makes it a lot clearer for me, because then it makes a lot of sense for us to, I think, to move forward, as long as I was understanding it right.
Last summer, we went to a meeting in Montpelier with the BSA, VPA, several schools that were looking to solve the problem, and they suggested that Act 156 was our best channel to accomplish this, because it didn't have the large number of 900 students necessary to make it happen. And it also satisfies the requirements under Act 46. So it's a little bit less onerous and less complicated. That's what we're trying to do in this supervisory union now, with limited success so far.
Could I suggest that we have everybody introduce themselves for the public that may be viewing this? We're not usually in the video, but these meetings will be videoed and on tape, so I want to thank BCTV for providing the service. And take it away.
Want to start on that side?
Dan MacArthur from the Marlboro School Board.
Stephen John, Superintendent of Schools, Wyndham Central.
Chris Pratt, Superintendent of Wyndham Southwest.
I'm Bill Antone, I'm the principal of the Dover School and the future superintendent of Wyndham Central.
Emily Long, Leland and Gray from Newfane.
Rich Warner from Dover.
Ken McFadden, Newbrook from Newfane.
Seth Boyd, Chair of Twin Valley and Wyndham Southwest Supervisory Union.
John Doty, Whitingham School Board.
Sharon Barry, Whitingham School Board.
All right, thanks for that formality reminder. Sometimes we forget about that when we're all friends sitting around the table.
Yeah, we don't know
Go
each
ahead.
other.
Can I get just a clarification on some of the discussion that just took place? So in the case that the supervisory unions vote to consolidate or merge, do the individual towns, they don't retain their district in this, they all become one district? Is that correct, or do they retain?
No, they retain, you
So-
retain your school district entity and your school district boards,
Okay.
unless otherwise
But Act
decided.
46 is still, you know,
Yeah,
in place
but,
as well.
but
so we
Act
have
46
to-
still obliges you to do something that way, but.
Right, okay.
Unless from a joint district board, right?
Sorry,
Supposed to be a
yes.
joint district, joint
Well,
school
no,
district.
yes, you have that when you have two school districts, but when you have two SUs going together, it's not a joint SU, there's not a possibility of
Right.
that. It's a,
But, so even if we were, just so I think everybody's clear, maybe this is where Dan was going. So if Wyndham Southwest and Wyndham Central said, we're gonna work together to combine a bunch of resources and stuff, we still have Act 46 to deal with. That's not gonna satisfy Act 46. And Act 46 is only satisfied by us looking at the possibility of any collaboration or any combinations, and then making a plan to submit to the state, and then the state will decide if we're okay or not. Act 156, that has to go through that has to go through the.
it goes through the State
Yeah.
Board of Education does approve the plan as well.
Okay.
But really, the biggest difference is it doesn't change the school district boards,
Right.
and it doesn't change the authority of the budgeting of those school district boards. It, of course, does change the SU budget, being determined by the new joint SU board or whatever new entity you have. That's, yeah.
Like for instance, you know, we've been looking at the side-by-side model. So you would take Stanford, Reedsburg, Halifax, they would be combined to be one district, and then Twin Valley would remain the same, they just wouldn't be adjoined. So that would be the side-by-side there. And so the schools would keep their autonomy, they would keep their school choice, and under 156, they'd still get their 8, 6, 4, 2, keep their school grants, so.
And if Wyndham Central, Wyndham Southwest side go together though, that's where I was going with, because that's what we're here for tonight. But that's not gonna just satisfy, I mean, if we combine and Halifax, Reedsboro, and Stamford all decide not to do anything, just stay the same, and the Twin Valley group stayed the same, the Board of Ed could look at that, and even though we did something under 156 for the supervisory unions, they could say that it wasn't enough for Act 46, and we want to see some.
Act 156 would satisfy the 46 requirements, only because, for us, it's because we're under 900 students.
Oh, your side?
We're at 710. I don't know what you guys are at, but, you know, a side-by-side would satisfy the Act
No,
46
but I'm
requirements.
saying if there's no side-by-side,
Right.
if the supervisory unions decide to do something
Between the
together.
supervisory unions.
Oh, you mean just at the SU level?
Right, if we just
Right.
did something at the SU level, because we can't do side-by-sides at the SU level, that would not satisfy Act 46.
Each school district could still have to comply with the
Right.
requirements of Act
That-
46.
So, okay. That's just what, that was some confusion, some of the people I was talking to had, so I think that makes it really clear. So basically, if we decide to do something, it's not gonna do away with the Act 46 and looking at those studies, so that's all I want to clarify.
So can I just sort of follow that line of thinking? And so when Stephen suggested we are here to talk as a continuation of our original conversation, I guess I'm not sure how we would continue that conversation when part of the reason why we stopped it was because of the law that was sort of coming
Right.
down the road and now is here, Act 46. And so, just sharing of services such as in that study that came out isn't where we can land anymore. We know we have to do more than that. So I guess it sort of changes, in my mind, the conversation that we're having between the two SUs. I think it's extremely important that we have this conversation between the SUs to see if there's something we can do to, but at the same time, I think it's really important that we are really aware of the foundation here. We can't just walk the same path we were walking when we had this conversation last time.
Right, because it's not gonna get us to where
Right.
we're required to be.
So I think the key word there from Emily was you have to do more. You know, this would not be enough to satisfy the requirements of Act 46 in the face of it. Now, Chris points out that there is in Act 46 the opening for alternate structures or alternate governance models. And it remains to be seen whether there's sufficient interest in that, you know, subsequently. Right now, all the districts in my SU are studying what they want to do, and they're having a hard time deciding. So, narrowing the options. But it's certain, the law doesn't preclude some creative governance structure, but they don't presume that it's going to get approved or not by the State Board of Education. And we're talking about 2018 at at that point, end of 2017, 2017, before July 1, some proposal.
And also in the alternative structures, even if they did accept it, you would avoid the 5% tax hike, but you wouldn't get any of the incentives. So there's a trade-off there.
Yeah, we don't get quite the incentive.
In the alternative models, right.
I didn't realize there was a modification of that.
In the alternative, that's why, I didn't look into any alternative models because we need some of the incentives that we're getting.
It gets confusing when we talk about there's conventional, there's,
Yeah.
accelerated, there's alternative, and if everybody isn't, and I even hear them used differently when people are talking about them. So I think if we're gonna use terms, we should make sure everybody understands what they are, because.
Yeah, 156 isn't an alternative. It's it's under 156. Alternative is something totally, you're coming up with your own plan, shooting from the
Yeah,
hip.
156 defines the conventional.
Yep.
That's right.
So, back to the beginning of the conversation. Where should, I guess, what is this committee charged with focusing on, is my question.
Well, we were going under a former charge, which was to look at if,
Or
Yeah.
collaborating. If there was if there were avenues for collaboration between the two SUs, that was our original.
Right. And is that what we're still working under? Is everybody on the same
that's
page
what
with that?
we
or-
thought we should do to make it so that we didn't have to try to go back to the super boards and get permission to go and restudy or
Change the
reappoint.
scope. Yeah.
That's why we thought we'd use the committee of 6.
Mhm.
My thought kind of was to expand that a little bit now because of Act 46, just to look into, is there room to collaborate that may help us and help each individual supervisor union with the requirements of Act 46 also.
One of the questions, if I can, that I had is that now that we are at the other side of that law that was coming down the road when we last had our conversation, was, are the two SUs in the same place? Are they still saying, is there something we can do to work together? And I mean, this has really changed the playing field, I think, for all of us in the state.
I agree.
And I think it's really important that if there's something we can do to help improve education for kids, we should be having that conversation. And so I think that was why Rich sent the email out to all the different SUs surrounding us, because it wasn't just you folks, but
Yeah,
yet
sure,
you're the ones who
understand.
responded and said we'd like to continue the conversation, and
Yeah.
why not? Right, so.
And we get asked that at Wyndham Central, how come we haven't talked to any other supervisory unions yet? I mean, that's come up a few times.
I mean, to be fair, a lot of supervisory unions seem to be looking within and not without under Act 46. And that's fine, you know, I think, but since we've already had the beginnings of a conversation to explore outside, nothing to stop us from continuing to talk.
And I mentioned briefly at the last meeting, I think it's all about protecting central southern Vermont school structure between the two supervisory unions. I think that we have a lot to gain by working together to protect what we have as best we can, you know.
You
Hi,
put
Laura.
a chair up.
How are you?
I mean, does everybody feel that way?
Feel what way?
That that's the goal?
Um,
To protect what's there?
I guess I don't know that. Certainly, my opinion is that should be part of our.
Can you define who you mean by that?
Well, when we've done studies before, and we did a supervisory union boundary study, which included the boundaries to our east and to our west, and there really was nothing that was beneficial, we felt, by collaborating or joining or changing a boundary to our east and our west, because they're just completely different entities as far as, maybe that's not explaining it perfectly, but there's a much better match demographically, I think, between Wyndham Central and Wyndham Southwest than, you know, those supervisory unions to our east and the west, and even just geographically. So, under these new laws, you know, I say protection because I think if we don't do anything, the state's gonna let us know what we need to do or make those changes for us. So, in my opinion, if we are proactive and we come up with a plan that works for us and works under the law, then we are in fact protecting our central southern Vermont school structure. And like I said, if nobody else thinks that's one of the goals, that's fine. It's just my opinion. Yeah.
Well, I want to answer the question that came up before, I think just before. In your grant, the previous grant that Wyndham Southwest got, it says here at the bottom of this paragraph, I sent this out, I do have hard copies here, if people want to, have a copy, but it looks a little edited because this was the only copy I had existing, it wasn't the actual signed copy. But at any rate, it says here under 7, it says, in phase 1, which we completed, in phase 1, we will bring together all potential affected parties, design the study, and investigate pros and cons of the current situation in southern Vermont. It came to me when Seth mentioned southern Vermont. And then, should the boards decide to proceed, which we did not at the time of the conclusion of that study, should the boards decide to proceed, a second grant will be applied for under Code 3716 for SU merger and petition in order to identify possible options for reconfiguration that will achieve the desired outcomes, to analyze each option and then to prioritize and develop steps for moving forward. So, in fact, these two SUs still would qualify for a subsequent grant under 156 to study further a merger of the two SUs. That doesn't absolve any of the individual districts from responsibilities regarding Act 46
Right.
and consolidating boards, but it does, I mean, it's clear in this grant where we are in the stage of development regarding the Committee of 6 that was assigned to undertake this study. And apparently both boards both SU boards feel that the Committee of 6 should meet, at least this time, at this time, to decide how to proceed, if at all, at the SU level.
And would there be a conflict with everything going on with Act 46 and any possible merger that comes out of this? For example, when Wardsboro wants to go to
Yeah,
Brattleboro
yeah, or it's more logical to think about option Marlboro.
or Marlboro, right, and then all of a sudden you have disagreement between two supervisory unions and you're losing people out of the supervisory union to other supervisory unions. So how far can we really go to make something more cost efficient and then have that disrupted and numbers constantly changing because people are moving in and out with Act 46? Just,
Yeah, it's,
Happens with the
I'd hate to
rest-
see,
the rest
I'd
studies
hate
have
to
the
see
same
something
issue.
really good get put together,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, well, this part's not gonna work anymore, and this isn't gonna work anymore, and we gotta, get rid of 2 FTEs over here, because those schools are now over there, and
So I think that's the point of exploring and deciding, because once you get to a point where you're, your articles of agreement are where your committees are starting to say, this is who's gonna be necessary to include in the reorganized district under Act 46 or 156 or 153. But once that decision is made, then you move on to the more formal, we're still in that exploratory stage, I think.
right,
Have
that's what I'm
for quite a
saying,
while,
if we're trying to
so.
plan on something that way, is Act 46 gonna interfere with it? I guess anything's possible.
yeah, yeah. I do think that you all serving on individual boards, and you know what the problems are for your own board and school district regarding the options and trying to pare things down to what are the feasible, not just what's possible, but what's the most feasible. That's what I sense my boards are dealing with at this point. And I don't see the two being in conflict, but after all, you can always think of reasons to not look into it. And we did that before. We being the Committee of 6 decided not to pursue it. And I think I commend you all for actually hanging in. You're all still on the committee and you're still here, so this shows something. And I know that, Nancy Talbot signed this grant originally. Then it was, Rich, what was his last name? Yeah. Clements, okay. Rich Clements met with me initially to come up with some kind of way that we could look at the administration or the costs administratively at the central office level, both central offices. And And then Chris Pratt followed up, as you probably saw in the email, if it was shared with you. I don't have access to the other side here quite often, so I brought hard copies. But anyway, this goes back to when Chris Pratt and I revised it in September rather, of 14. So, you know, this idea's been going a while, and I just dredged this up from my files to make sure people knew that it's not like starting from square one. If you decide as a committee that you want to jointly contract for things and not even combined SUs. But that's, remains to be seen.
I just have a question for the superintendents. Have you had any discussions that were fruitful and you came to a shared opinion on ways that we could cooperate, consolidate, and serve children better?
You know, just the conversations that, you know, Stephen and I had in here back in 2014.
Give me the clip one back.
We haven't really met much beyond that because, you know, Act 46 came along and
Right.
kind of turned everything upside down.
Right. If we had a charge to look at this again and say, oh, specifically, what would you do next fall? Certainly that, you know, that could be done. I mean, generally, we're on a contractual basis. It'd be wise to get onto that when we issue contracts this June, May. So we know what are the, you know, things that are the most easily accomplished and would promise the greatest benefit. And there is nothing illegal or inappropriate about two SUs contracting for a joint service.
Right.
And apportioning the cost appropriately.
But the difficulties that we kept coming across was that we're so spread out, it wouldn't be much of a cost savings because the mileage you'd be paying teachers to go between, you know, so that's, I think, you know, we think of one thing and the other thing kind of counters it and kind of washes it out, so.
But, you know, also if you go back to your study, the study said there appears to be too many separate school districts and school boards to make it practical or realistic to consolidate, integrate superintendent services. Financial accounting software program processes and long-term direction for fiscal management are very different. It would be quite expensive and impractical to try to coordinate or integrate the two systems. You know, the one place that it said, if you read that study, the one place it says we may be able to do something is grant writing.
That was Wayne Gershen's study you're talking about there, right? You're reading from that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just going back to kind of with Act 46 in the background. I mean, the first sentence, shared administrative service, there appears to be too many separate school districts and school boards to make it practical or realistic to consolidate. Act 46 says there's too many, I'm gonna say it wrong, and it's not meant to be like a shot at anybody, but, you know, basically they're saying, let's look at combining some school districts or school boards, so that we can better serve our districts to better serve our students. And, you know, right here, I mean, this recognized over 2 years before Act 46 became law, that, you know, for us to do something, we can't just do something with the way the structure is set up now. And that's why I thought it was good to get us back together. You know, if you read this report, it has a lot of the answers on what we need to look at, what we need to do if we have that interest. Or at least that's my thought.
Mark?
Oh, that's right,
Well,
sorry.
Yeah.
Excuse
We're
me.
tag teaming it.
Excuse me, sorry.
We're in his town.
Yeah, okay. So, I think the question of protecting some educational assets, ensuring that there are some out in this area is actually a really important one, and I would not presume that everybody feels that that's important. So I think that's actually really important. I think that can actually come into conflict potentially with opportunities for kids because we haven't fixed the funding mechanism, because we have lost population. And so there's a lot of drive, you know, to make sure that we're doing the right thing for kids, which of course is all of our number one priority. But that I think puts in jeopardy on maintaining systems. One of the questions that I have about this work that was done and thinking about what Chris has said, you know, that because the finding was things were too spread out really to find any efficiencies. All of our schools, I think, are connected now by the sovereign, right? The fiber,
That's true in the SU and the library, WCSU.
all the
It's true for
individual
you as
schools.
well?
Pretty much, I
I
think.
don't
Goes-
think anybody's missed,
goes
are they?
down.
I don't know about yours, I see, but ours all.
You know, I mean, have we
They're all
done
connected.
anything to look at what opportunities there are to improve educational opportunities for kids? And I would say particularly in the high schools, given that fiber that we have now running to these schools. I mean, that fiber is capable of really stable video conferencing.
Yep.
You know, I mean, is that an opportunity to look at?
So that could happen today between the two high schools if the principals and the superintendents, with the support of the boards, chose to go that path. That's never come to the Leland and Gray board that I've ever heard. There's never been any suggestion of it or certainly not any request to do that.
So, I mean, as some of you know, Emily certainly knows, Rich knows, you know, I think I've had some conversations with Bill. You know, I'm very, and Seth, you know, I'm really a little bit angsting about this situation here. I feel like we have some vulnerabilities, and particularly in Wyndham Southwest because of the size. And, you know, folks are really helping me kind of see, well, maybe we need to be looking at some small, short-term, medium-term, and longer-term opportunities. You know, what are the things that are in the hopper and making sure those things are getting done? What are the next pieces coming out of it? And maybe this is a medium-term thing, or even a short-term thing. What is the opportunities for the high schools in collaborating with fiber electronically? You know, and even with Brattleboro, which I think would be really important. I mean, the infrastructure is there.
So that would really require the principals to be involved with that and the superintendents? What courses would we be in? What courses, do our courses align, number one?
Mhm.
And what courses would benefit
Right.
from having that collaboration through technology? You know, not to say it couldn't be driven by the boards to say, let's look at it.
Well, I mean, I think it
But
would be a
have
charge
to
from the
be-
boards, right? to,
Sure, but
like-
it would have to be, you know, with the full involvement and support of the superintendents and
course.
principals first, I think. Because if there's a lack of alignment, we'd have to align before we could do that, I think, for curriculum.
So I think, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying this is not something the boards would kind of drive, which I don't know if I agree
Oh,
with that.
no, that's not what I'm saying. Not
Okay.
at all. But what I'm saying is even if the boards say, we want this to happen, well, we could both say, it. Twin
Yeah.
Valley and Leland and Gray could say, we want this to happen.
Mhm.
We'd still have to count on the professionals, educational professionals, to make sure that there's a way to implement the goal. And if,
Right.
and it's very possible that it could be done easily. There could be courses that would work with, but it's also possible that their curriculum and our curriculum aren't aligned, and we would have to find a way to walk that path.
So, right, and I think I understand what you're saying, that, you know, that could be, it doesn't seem to me that it would be super, you know, like, we could just solve a problem just like that, but maybe starting to outline the parameters of what that problem might be. You know, as opposed to how do we solve it, but what are the challenges if we were to
It's an
do
option
some
on the
sort of,
table.
yeah. And, you know, potentially, I think, talking to Brattleboro, potentially talking to the Career Center. I mean, the workforce stuff that we are doing at my regular job, you know, and trying to reach out, you know, it's really hard. You know, Brattleboro can throw 10 people at a meeting and keep up with us, you know? It's really hard for Leland Gray and Twin Valley to have people come out and sit in hour-long meetings with us and, you know, other people and kind of work on this stuff. I think, you know, this is really a place that we need to start looking.
Oh, go ahead. Let John, sure. Yeah.
If my memory serves correctly, the Career Center put out a catalog, I think, of 109 courses that they have available online that are available to all of us already. But again, the complication is, what time do those courses meet? What time what are the bell schedules at Leland and Gray, and what are the bell schedules at Twin Valley? It's that kind of coordination that really has to happen. It's on the ground kind of fixing. But the, you know,
But do we
the
have a list of
opportunities are there.
those?
There is
Do
a
we have-
list, there's already a list.
But I mean, do we have a list of the challenges that have to be overcome to do something like that?
No.
That's, I think what I'm suggesting,
Yeah.
like, why don't we outline the
Well,
size?
I think there's another thing here that goes along with that I want to mention, that, you know, both Twin Valley and Leland and Gray are struggling to keep their students. They have, you know, declining populations, and it's probably not on the top of the principal's agenda to see how many of their students they can farm out to someone else.
Mhm.
So that's, you know, be honest, that works into the workload and what's important at each building.
Can I just ask a question on,
Sure.
piggybacking on that? So if I hear Laura correctly, she's not saying to farm the students out. What she's saying is to offer those classes within. So you're actually keeping the students in the building, allowing them to take classes online, which we've talked about a couple times at our meetings, and making sure that they're in alignment. So they do a third block. I mean,
Yeah, but the complication comes that by doing such a thing, you're reducing the number of students or teachers that you need in your building.
oh, your FTEs.
And that's where the protection
Sure.
comes in.
So I think actually what I am starting to gel around, I might be suggesting is, you know, Chris had noted a lot of the findings said we're too really dispersed to find efficiencies. Stephen said, you know, we had an opportunity to go to the next thing, we still do, but, you know, what is the next thing? I mean, what if the opportunities that were there and potential, you know, opportunities for kids, what if the next thing is to look at, can technology overcome the challenges of the geography?
Yeah, technology was one of the topics, certainly. that was
Yeah,
brought
it
up.
was on this list. I think that we have some assets. We now have common core state standards that we did not have years ago. We have next generation science standards. We have standards that can free us up and assure that even if our program of studies and course offerings were dissimilar, that they would be tied to the core standards. That's certainly true at Leland and Gray via what's called an atlas system. Anybody can go online and see any course at Leland and Gray and see how it ties to the standards. And it's public access. Now, what I think is that it would be, I'm not so concerned about these two schools having aligned courses. I'm more excited about the prospect that there'll be different courses
Right.
in each of those each of those locations by teachers of disparate interests, different backgrounds. Because after all, the purpose of anything we're trying to do here is to broaden learning opportunities rather than narrow them. So I do think that, I'm trying to put a positive spin on this perhaps, but I mean, that really is what I see as the exciting prospect and advantage of a collaboration. However, it has to be generally supported by the primary policy decision makers, that is the boards.
Yes, agreed.
The boards can direct, these superintendents to do whatever and hold us accountable to get it done. But it has to be clear what the goals are, and then the boards have to be willing to reallocate resources to support it. And that's really the challenge I think John's referring to when we talk about the challenge of FTEs, because generally local boards have always been hesitant, at least in my experience, when I recommend a reduction of force, to approve it. That's,
You've never recommended that for us, I've always asked you.
It's recommended for us.
I've recommended it many times.
Just like a point of order, and I know
Okay,
Buzzy's
sorry.
died and stuff, but, this is, where we're kinda going here is nothing that this group can do. That's for the two high school boards to
Good
deal
point.
with.
Good
It's,
point.
even if we said, that's the greatest idea in the world, let's do it, we're directing you guys to do that, the high school board's gonna look at us and go like this and say, it's not ours, I think that's something the superintendent should bring to the high school boards at their next meetings, and I hope, that works, and I think it's a great idea, and I'm wondering why it hadn't happened so far, and I know that, I think there was some discussion between a board member and a board member, something on two different high school boards. But I think I want to look at Wyndham Central and Wyndham Southwest and the supervisory unions. And if you go back to your thing, the summary that you and Stephen and Chris did, you know, you have grant fund coordinator, CFG coordinator, the Medicaid, you know, for administrative support. I know we're looking for a technology person. I know you redid the position. I don't remember the exact title you gave it, but kind of like a curriculum development. And, you know, because one of your things is our administrative leaders and assistants retire and move on. You know, let's look at that. Now, the technology piece that Laura brought up is, does that now allow us easier access to allow, like the, again, in the report from the consultant or the expert, you know, said that the financial couldn't work between the two districts as they're way too separate. You know, and at that time, I don't think the fiber was in. Now, is that a possibility? Has everybody gone to the same program? Could we look into doing that at this time? Could we look into combining our financial offices? Can we look into, when we go for our curriculum person, does Mr. Pratt have a need for something like that in his office, and should we be looking at that together? And then I think you're looking for an administrative person. You know, is that something, maybe he has somebody that he can't give a full-time job to? Is that a thing we can look at now?
So you're talking about software, like is everybody using the same software?
Well, or can we go to the same program, you know, with one person changing over? Because that's, you know, the programs were the drawback, but they felt they could work together. They said there's some stuff they could do together, but maybe it's time now to push that now that we have this high-speed internet. Maybe they can join our system or we can join your system and make it work for both of us.
So
But you're talking
Marlene-
about administrative functions at the SU.
Right, because
Yes,
that's
that's
what
what
we can control, that's what this group was kind of put together to talk about, and that's something we can say to them, go back, revisit this, and come back and give us a new report.
And a timeline for implementation.
How different would what Rich is suggesting look like, and the timeline of doing it with both SUs pursuing a path for Act 46? I mean, it sounds like you guys are in exploratory to look at a side-by-side, and we're starting a meeting next week of
This
what
week.
we're, this week, of what we're doing. I'll be there, I promise.
Wednesday.
We're trying to be there. Is that something that you could start looking at now, even
I don't see any reason. we
even
can't
not
look at
knowing
it.
what the decision's gonna be? I don't know how long ours, do you have an idea of the time frame for our
Yeah, I actually,
exploratory SU study?
the time frame we were given is,
It's gonna go
It's
till
through
May.
It
yeah,
is through May?
final recommendations in May.
So it's not,
No, they don't.
you know, it's not a long time. It's a
No, and that's
fairly
exploratory
consolidated
studies
time
for our.
frame, which is good, is what I'm saying. I think that's
But I think it goes back to my original point is, even if the supervisory unions decide to do more, and then Chris's group is looking at this side by side, we may look at whatever we come up with in our study, and that still doesn't change that the supervisory unions can't do something together. And if there's less districts and boards, it actually takes that big issue that was part of the
Right,
original
part of the
studies right out of
reimbursement
there.
study. And it also doesn't preclude after the decisions around, or as we're making decisions in both SUs around the Act 46, whether we might want to explore a different type of collaboration. You know, I mean, you know, a more expanded type. I don't think there's any door shut on anything.
Right, I agree, I mentioned that to Rich when we had our first conversation.
I think this is very timely right now, this meeting here, because we at WCSU have an organizational meeting with the new WCSU board later on in March. You probably have to have that as well.
Yeah.
It's the usual timeline for governance. So if, in fact, for that agenda for that meeting, we have on that meeting, besides the election of officers and, you know, the other business, if we have something about charging the superintendents to do a report, or, you know, acting on some kind of, you know, the thing is, I want to make sure that my successor has the charge from the support of the WCSU board to proceed on this collaboration and actually see what we can, it'll be under my charge until June 30th, see what we can jointly contract for in terms of service. I mean, I think that's all you're talking about. You're not talking about joining governance or anything at this point. Well, you can't join governance before, you know.
Well, it came up, you could combine at the SU level.
Yes, but you
You
have
not have to worry about the public voting on that piece there, but combining the SU level, whether it's one central
So-
office or whatever is looking, I think that's what came up before is, you know, how, what would that look like? Are there any savings there? And, like, you know, I don't know if you're looking at condensing off, you know, not having two of everything, but I think that is something that would be a starting point, because from there, if both sides looking at the side-by-sides and it's similar, then the next progression would be, okay, if you have K8 side-by-sides over there, you get K6 side-by-sides in Wyndham Central, we have two K12s. I mean, it's just, I think it's stepping stones that we're trying to lay out here to move in that direction.
Laura?
Yeah. I mean, is there any reason that, I mean, what does that entail? I mean, so to,
Combined SU.
if you combine the SUs,
Yeah.
the thing that most concerns me about what's going on right now,
Combine.
what's
You
that?
have to define what you mean by
Right,
combine,
well-
so. It doesn't have to be detailed, but you should, when you're talking, you should say what you mean.
So if you
by
were
shared
to
services.
take, what I'm worried about is there's not enough puzzle pieces on the table for what we're looking at with Act 46, and also to ensure quality education institutions in both valleys, in the West River and the Deerfield Valley. And so I'm wondering how we make sure we have as many pieces as possible on the table, so that for Act 46 and to make sure they're rich. And so I wonder if that in any way helps just to have, if you had all those pieces on the table. I mean, all these schools are talking to each other anyway at this point. This is where I get a little concerned, you know, with the whole Southeast also. Perhaps, but that's, you know, on a different.
I think if you're looking from a voter standpoint, because eventually that's what we're gonna need. No matter what we come up with a plan, we gotta, whether convince or do our homework, so the voters are gonna vote in a way that's gonna be beneficial to the kids in both SUs. And I think it's less scary to think of combining an SU than it is to combine districts across SUs.
But
Yeah, but there might be some advantages going both ways. You know, if you look at the operations at the SU level, they're basically special education. I'm gonna say special services like art, phys ed, you know, those kinds of courses. Transportation and finance management. Those are basically the things you do.
Right.
And grants, you know, you do grants. But, you know, if we look at those and see, okay, does Reedsboro have trouble hiring a music teacher? Usually, you know? Could this kind of an operation help them out? Because we have a music teacher who only has a part-time job and could spend a day in Reedsboro delivering music? It's not gonna cost you transportation if the person goes to one place for a day or one region. Maybe they go to Stanford and Reedsboro and split a day. That's not gonna cost a whole lot of money.
It's finding those bodies that are willing to do that, because.
I understand.
Because I think the struggle is that, because I'm only speaking because this is what we're facing now, because we are in the position of trying to fill these, you know, the music positions and the art positions at these three smaller schools, and they're relatively not that far apart, but we're always competing with the bigger SUs for salaries. I mean, that's the struggle right there. You have people who are willing, who wanna be on board, and they wanna be part of, I know about Wyndham Central, about Wyndham Southwest, but that struggle in there, I think, and also, we could get to that level, but I know in some cases you have different positions at the SU level that we don't have yet. So it's talking about, are we similar in regards to who we have at the central office SU level? Like, we just have special educators. We don't have paras or specialists or anything like that. So it's breaking down those and finding out what the similarities that we already have in place.
Or things that you can both augment, that maybe the differences, as was said before, you know?
like, is it possible to have one central office? Yeah, but you'd have to have it in a centralized
I would
location.
also,
I'm not even.
I would think about it in terms of bringing more assets to the table and not in terms of what efficiencies can be gained. Because truthfully, I don't think there's a lot of fat in these two SUs. I really don't. So, I mean, I think what are the additional opportunities that could happen if something like that? How could the assets that are existing enhance the educational opportunities? Now, how do we get rid of pieces of?
Chris, you just mentioned about, you don't have itinerant teachers that are hired in your SU and sent out. So each individual school, those 3 school districts you were saying are having a hard time hiring, they would each be hiring a 2 dense or 3 dense or whatever percent person?
Yeah, they'd be sharing that person.
So have you
between the
had
3.
that conversation at your SU about whether you could, I mean, or if you combine, say you do move forward with the side-by-side, maybe those 3 schools, I'm just throwing it out, maybe the 3 schools get together and form one, and then you've got one contract that is serving 3 buildings.
Yeah, I think a lot of
Or maybe
times,
even
it's just a difference in philosophy in some of the boards, like, one school may say, yes, we want, but we don't, and it's gonna make it full-time, but we don't wanna pay benefits. Do you know what I'm saying? They wanna keep it,
Well,
so I think a lot of it does come down sometimes to philosophical differences between boards and what they're willing to pay and what they're willing not to, so.
But things are changing too. I mean, things are changing.
Yeah, Rich.
So I guess I'm going back to, and kind of like Laura, when you said come together, I mean, I think there's all sorts of levels of coming together. Like, there is one central office with one office and one superintendent, but I wasn't even going there. I was starting off with what you guys originally were looking at. Very simple stuff that's more administrative function than really even at board level stuff. Like, again, hey, Stephen, your librarian's only working 0.5. I need a half librarian for some other positions. Now we can go together and maybe we can hire this person full-time and we'll get a better we'll get a better candidate, or we'll have more candidates because this person isn't looking at a half-time job, they're looking at a full-time job.
looking at two half-time jobs.
Well.
Because they're 2 separate
Right,
entities
but
that
we
would
could-
hire them.
Yeah, but they would be guaranteed the jobs, together. And then things like the financial services, could we, now that we have the high-speed internet, could we work together with, like, you have the payroll clerk works out of your office, but and payroll checker person works out of the other office, and they can email stuff. And I don't know, because that's your guys' jobs, and I don't know them, but, you looked at this, you said there was some stuff you thought you could do, and I think you could look at it again, and we may realize some savings and some better uses, and you still have, you're the superintendent, you just, some of your people work part-time for you and part-time for them, but they now have a full-time job, which everybody who wants to work, and I know there's some people who don't want to work full-time, but I think that's done without combining or having this
Right.
big vote, and that's where I thought maybe we can ask them to look at first before we even go to our reorganizational meetings, because then we can meet again and discuss what they thought of or what they came up with every group we decide to move forward with.
So you're kind of in line with what Chris was talking about, stepping stones.
Yeah.
Just,
Well, I think Act 46 is just a stepping stone. I really believe, well, no, I mean, we've had this discussion before, because everybody's kind of looked in-house first.
Mhm.
But I think the state was envisioning more than just looking within supervisory unions. But I think we're gonna get Act 46, and we're gonna deal with this in the next couple of years, and 5 or 6 or 7 years down the road, we're gonna have Act whatever, 83.25.
Or
And-
maybe not, maybe
Right.
school districts on their own will
Well,
change.
But I
do something.
think there's gonna be more going on past this, because every school's losing students. Even the big schools are still losing. So eventually, they're gonna get smaller too. So in 10 years, it may be that Chris and Bill come to us and say, hey, look, we're thinking now that we've got so few students, and that here's a new reorganization, or the state may mandate something. So I think this Act 46 is the first step in towards more of a regionalizing services. But that's just my humble opinion.
yeah, when we first met with the 2 supervisory unions, that very first meeting up in Dover, one of the things that came out of that was synergies between the 2. So I agree with what Laura said. Not necessarily competing with each other, but what's this school offer that this one doesn't have? And I think that's important to keep in mind, no matter what we're talking, no matter what level of collaboration or working together that we're talking about. And if we do get to the point where this goes to, we have to bring this to the public, they need to know what the benefits are. Because we're not gonna get anything passed in any of our towns unless we can prove what the benefits would be. And I think we need to pay attention to that, not just because the law says you're supposed to do it, but what's the benefits to students in both districts.
But if we can realize savings, taxpayers will be happy.
But not even just savings, but I think maybe that, Chris isn't pulling his hair out so he looks like me because he can't find a position to fill, but between the two of them, they were able to fill it. And
Yeah.
maybe Stephen, has been looking for a really good person for this job, and Chris has one that's looking for more hours, and that helps them both. And, without such a formal thing as there's no more Wyndham Southwest and Wyndham Central, it's now the Wyndham Middle of the
Southern Central.
middle of Massachusetts.
Southern Greenville.
Yeah.
So I'm putting this out because I think it's easily overlooked and no one intends to overlook it. But one of the things that I want to make sure is that we are not laying something on the plates of our administrators who are dealing with, and I'm thinking about this very broadly, even down to the principal level and our employees. Is this something that's feasible to do? Is the time right to do what we're talking about doing? Is this something that the two SUs could get together and do? Because much of this work is not about boards. I mean, we can say, do the collaboration, but we're changing our superintendent in a very short period of time here, and there's a lot on the plate with two studies going on, one in each SU for exploratory right now, and who knows what the next, that might lead to another study, or multiple. If they're side by sides, you need a study committee for both sides, or the multiple sides, which could be a number of them. So I just want, I'm not saying, and it's no value judgment, I'm just saying that I want us to make sure that we're very mindful of that piece, because there's a lot on the plate of our schools right now, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a really, really important point. I also think that the stakes right now are incredibly high. Incredibly high in terms of population, in terms of, how our communities are gonna look. And so, if we need to create additional capacity, that might be something that should be talked about. Is there some other
Internal capacity at the SU.
I don't even know if
Is
it's
that
internal,
something that
I don't
would
even know
come
if
out of a
it's.
study,
I-
our exploratory studies?
Sure, I think that's something that could come out of the exploratory study, I think I'm pretty, I think, we're, good.
All right, so, their next step.
Yeah, what's the next step? Because, I'm asking on behalf of my colleagues here.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
think
that-
Emily asked a question that hasn't been answered,
Oh, yeah, I can answer that question.
didn't she?
Well,
Easy for me to say, I'm not gonna be around
It was
after 30.
It was a question that I guess I didn't expect an answer for. I just wanted it, I'm laying it on the table because I'm very concerned about that.
Compared with other
It's not just
things
here.
that I have to consider regarding Act 46, this is a piece of cake. Now, whether it can work out or not, I'm just saying that this is the kind of thing that administrators can deal with. We can look at positions and what the functions are and make some decisions. Am I correct there, Chris, or am I overspeaking? No
Go with it.
Okay. The thing is that Bill would obviously join me on our side of it in terms of what makes sense for a long-range plan. Unless you have some timeline about where you're going, you can't accomplish these things just overnight. So what I was really sincere in saying, I'd love to have an opportunity to look at this document once again and put it in priority order of what can happen when and in what way. Because I've already posted a position in consultation with Bill which is called, by the way, the Curriculum Instruction Assessment and Technical Integration position.
And you said mine was long?
Well, you know,
Just a little bit
we're
short.
just trying to be a little inclusive there. Any rate,
That's why I couldn't repeat it.
yes,
It's aspirational.
it's an aspirational position, but that isn't what the A stands for, it's assessment. Okay, so,
Initial spell out.
but, you know, there are other things that I know of, and I'm sure Chris knows of some things confidentially about people's professional futures and what their opportunities may be and what changes may happen. We're in the season now where I get calls frequently for letters of recommendation. And, you know, so I'm just pointing out that this is a timely, you know, meeting. And if we come away from this meeting with a specific charge as superintendents to do something before your organizational meetings or whenever you are going to meet again as a committee of 6, that would be welcome.
It's a short timeline, but.
Well,
I mean-
I mean, it isn't that we
The
haven't,
outline's there.
it isn't that we haven't been thinking before.
No, and I agree with you. I think this is fairly easy for you guys to. put
You would
together
agree
if
with
have
that, Chris?
capacity.
What's that?
With what Stephen just said, or is that not?
Yeah, I think the timing in regards to looking down the road and we're gonna know what positions we're gonna have to fill. I think the bigger picture is that if we do have these matching positions, I mean, we have different contracts. Who's gonna say which where are they gonna fall on whose contract? Because possibility, look, someone could say grieve it and say they're getting paid more. So those are the things that are gonna take time to figure out. Can we identify positions that we both need to fill? Absolutely, but it goes further than that, then how are we gonna fill them if we do fill them?
Yeah.
Which contract
But that can be
they fall
done by
under?
agreement.
And we can't issue contracts without agreement from the boards. I mean, that's what we have to resolve. So, but, you know, that, I think that,
And with Act 46, all the boards are gonna change anyway.
well, yeah, I'm talking about the SU board. In terms of hiring at the SU level, right?
Mhm.
That is the SU board's
Right.
decision about how that would get worked out. So I think that once we have support as superintendents for what the outline and the time frame is for accomplishing some of these collaborative joint administrative support efforts, then the next step would be to actually get to the details of the contractual arrangements so that you could actually implement some of these, issue contracts. That may be a little more tedious, and that is where Chris and I anticipate the two SU boards may not agree.
But something such as finance,
Well, we mentioned specifically an issue of finance in the Gershon study was that they're different accounting systems.
but you know, Stephen, that's baloney, because.
Ken, I'm
No,
agreeing
no,
with
I know,
you.
I know.
I'm agreeing with you.
They're saying there's 2 different accounting systems. Well, we had a different accounting system, we went to a different one.
And it took some time,
And
you
it took
just
some-
have to be willing to invest in it and expect that
Right.
it isn't gonna happen
Right.
overnight.
And if in the long run it's gonna save you money, then that's something you should seriously look into.
I agree
If it's
entirely.
gonna save you manpower, it's gonna save you money, it's gonna be more efficient, then you should look into it, because accounting is accounting, no matter how you look at it, whatever program you're looking at, 2 and 2 is 4, 4 and 4 is 8, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
So, that's my opinion anyway, as far as the finance stuff goes. And like you said, there's also the grant writers and, you know, all these things can be,
Medicaid should be pretty standard.
Medicaid should be
Oh, yeah.
pretty standard, that, you know, that reimbursement,
Human
Person.
resources. the-
human resources.
So there's
Well,
a-
that might be a little tricky with the 2 different,
Well,
but,
my human
it might be a
resources
little more
are dealing
tricky,
with
but I'm not saying it
4
can't be
different
done.
contracts. That's right.
So there's a lot of efficiencies there
Or no
that we
contract.
know that can be done, and there's gonna have to be some give and take on either side, and that's,
Yeah, if you enter into it with that attitude, I think we can make it happen.
So I'm gonna channel my esteemed colleague, Ann Manwaring, who tells me quite often, and all of us quite often, how important it is for us all to be able to have the same accounting and data management system so that we can compare each other apples to apples. At the AOE right now, we just had a report that they're getting much closer on the chart of accounts, which is gonna help a lot.
Easy place to start, yeah.
And there's a lot of, there was a turnover in the IT up there, but they're still thinking that they're gonna be on better schedule with getting the rest of the data management resource stuff put together. That's gonna help all of us a lot. I would caution us to not move forward with big changes if they're not going to align, you know. So that's an area that, you know, maybe as superintendents, you'd wanna look at what the future looks like in that way, because I think we're heading in a better direction there. But again, talking about resources, the AOE is absolutely under-resourced, although they're not asking for more help up there, but they've lost 43 positions in the last 5 years. So, and we're asking a lot of them right now, so I just wanna make sure we're aware at that level as well.
Are they building a new chart of accounts? Is that what they're doing?
Yes, and it's nearing completion, I believe.
We've been asking.
And will
them
that
to
be
do
provided to
Yeah,
each
and it's
supervisor?
been way
10
behind,
years.
and money was put into it. and
Will that be provided to each supervisor unit?
It's a statewide
With the
system.
software?
It's a statewide system. I can't give you the details around it, but it's a statewide
Well,
system.
that's the solution right there.
Right.
I mean, if the state says, here's your system, use it.
We've been saying that for a long
I
time.
remember the state bought all the business managers' computers a few years ago, so they could all be at least, you know, somewhat similar.
To be fair, you know, I mean, there's two sides of this. There's a reason why we haven't had it, is because we all operate independently of each other, and that's no one's fault. That's just the way we operate. So to pull us all together is a huge undertaking, and so my thumbs are up on this. It's been a huge level of frustration for an awful lot of people in this state that it hasn't happened earlier, but there's been a lot of reasons why it hasn't, so.
Well, and building a chart of accounts is not easy.
No small thing, no. But they are completing it, I think.
I can remember people saying, you know, if we try and do that, all these guys are gonna be,
Or it will come to an end.
yeah.
No, we don't need to be in the same SIS.
Yes, that's true.
Is that-
I'm telling you,
Yes,
it's
go ahead.
pushing on a decade,
Hey, Bill,
trying to do that.
you're the only one that hasn't said anything all night.
Well,
And if you don't wanna say anything, I really understand
I
that,
don't
but-
start till July 1st, 2016.
That's all I have
but-
to say.
You showed up.
But as a principal, and
Sure.
and as the person, and I know you've been meeting a lot with Stephen about stuff, and,
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't wanna say anything, that's fine, but if you have any thoughts, I mean, there's been,
No, I think this is an unbelievably fruitful discussion. I think that it's incredibly important that these two groups continue to meet, because we don't know when the opportunities are going to arise. And if we continue to have these conversations, then we'll have a foundation to take advantage of when those opportunities do arise. So I think that's fundamentally extremely important. And then I think the idea of what Chris is talking about looking at some early wins, some synergies
low-hanging fruit.
that can happen, that can just happen because we want to
Make something happen.
be better at collaborating and look for opportunities right now. I think that's what Stephen and Chris have done in this document, and I think it's a really smart idea to just kind of prioritize this, but not recreate it. And look at, what can we make happen that makes a lot of sense right now. And then, Stephen has been extremely gracious over the past year to include me in a lot of these conversations, and Chris has been very generous about his time coming over and speaking with me about, these are the things I'm thinking about, this is what, could happen down the line. So I'm very confident that the two of them, prior to July 1st, 2016, could get an enormous amount of work done. I'd want to wait to include you on the prioritization. No, I think it's all possible. I think this is really a good foundational time. And I think that, I think it's good. I think it's really, really positive. But yes, I would clarify that prior to June 30th, 2016, a lot of this heavy lifting is done. Yeah.
Was that a repetition of something that was just said a few
Chris, I
minutes
thought
ago?
he liked you.
Depends what day it is.
Oh.
Right? Absolutely.
And the topic.
So it sounds like we're asking our superintendents to refresh this proposals for joint provision of services that our two SUs could
And
consider.
prioritize.
Yeah, and prioritize.
What is the low-hanging fruit? What is stuff they can do with not a lot of?
It'd be important to do something.
Can I ask you, Seth, a question, or the three of you, actually, a question? And it sort of popped into my head when Chris mentioned about the separate hiring of teachers, you know, because people didn't want. This sounds like it's more of a cultural shift for you guys than for us. And so, I mean, I'm not questioning anything about it, just asking, whether you guys feel like there's commitment from your SU to have these to take those steps. Sounds like you're all Twin Valley. Are you all from the Twin Valley?
I probably have more
Oh,
exposure to the other districts
Yeah.
being on the supervisory board and our board discussions, and I do think that they are very willing to participate. You know, we have had in years past some collaboration between teachers, but you know,
This is a lot different than.
it is, but our outlying districts have different agreements, different contracts, and are willing to offer
Right.
different benefits. So it was difficult to get somebody aligned in those positions sometimes. But when we did, when we were able to, we certainly have before. But yeah, no, I was surprised at their level of interest in.
Well, that's good to hear.
Being open and looking at options.
And that's really good to hear, and I appreciate you saying that.
Chris agrees with that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think they're at the point where
Yeah.
the difficult questions are being asked, they're trying to find answers, and right now, it doesn't matter if it's within district or without SU. Pretty much, everyone wants to do best for the students. Whether it's going outside their comfort zone or not, that's what they're really moving forward to do, is what is gonna be best for the students, within SU or without SU.
Yeah.
I think that's the bottom line.
Those that have banged their fists on the table in the past and said, we're gonna hang on to our school for as long as we can, are now sitting at the table asking questions.
It's much more of a collaborative
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah,
So the reason I ask is obviously not wanting to burden our administration to move forward with something if there really isn't commitment.
Yeah, no,
And
I
like I
think
say,
there's-
there's nobody from outside Twin Valley here tonight, so I just wanted to make sure that, you know, because there's always different levels of collaboration. So I appreciate that feedback from both sides
Yeah,
of
no,
that.
I
That's
think it's fair.
important.
I think it's there for sure. So, you know, town meeting is a week away, and then we do our reorg after town meeting.
When's your date?
Well, that's what I was just looking at.
Town meeting's the first,
Right.
so it's like the 7th, right?
Your SU organization board meeting, ours is the 20.
Let's see, the 23rd, I think we're the same.
Same
Yeah, we
night?
always have them on the same night. Seems
think
like
so.
You guys meet on
23rd?
Wednesday.
Yeah.
So why don't we shoot for something early April? That we can just let our reorganization groups know, and the superintendents can bring that forward. And that'll get them through town meeting and give them time to catch their breaths. And
Right.
does that work for you folks?
Do we
Superintendent?
do we have something ready for your SU boards to look at?
No, I think we would have a meeting after reorganizational meeting that you could bring to the group, and then the group can bring it back to the respective boards, is kind of the way I was seeing it.
Like around the beginning of April, you said.
Yeah, this kind of group can meet again, and then, because we all have annual meetings in May, right? You guys
Yeah,
have-
well, I'm concerned about the timeline for actually implementing anything in the next fiscal year. If you're, you know, the timeline that you propose regarding approval by the two SU boards in May at your annual meetings, which in our case is about the 3rd or 4th week in May, that really is after the issuing of contracts. Generally.
So you want to try to have something prepared for, at reorganizational meeting that could be
Yeah,
presented?
you know, I'm always hot to trot. I
But
mean,
that's not giving you folks, that's giving you.
Well, I
Well,
understand, I'm just saying that I mean, it's a redo of this situation, and if there isn't anything that warrants the prospect of implementation next fall, then I don't have this problem about the timeline, because you're not talking until the next year. But I suspect there may be something we can do here, or at least I'd like to have the charge, you know, the direction to do so, and then come back to this revised document at the reorganizational meetings with both SU boards, and see whether they say, well, you know, this looks like it has merit, so let's direct the superintendents to collaborate to issue joint contracts or whatever is necessary to get it to happen, and that will be the hard crunching about the benefits and the numbers and all that sort of thing.
You okay with that, Rich?
Yeah, I was surprised. I was figuring if we did that, we'd get shot.
Okay, Chris says I'm not going too fast, I'm just trying to be
You
sure.
guys okay with that?
I'll let you know next week.
And then what should the committee six plan on
So
getting
won't-
together again?
Why don't we plan on sometime in April after reorganizational, because they'll make their
That's right.
presentations and bring it back. So how about, the first Monday's April Fool's, isn't it? In April?
Perfect.
April 4th is
Oh.
the first Monday.
I wanna have an April Fool's meeting.
It's Friday.
You'd have
Not
to
this
have it on
year.
a Friday to do that.
There you go. So you want to do is the first Monday work for everybody?
It's good with me.
Can we do, yeah, can we do a 6:30 meeting and then we'll,
Hang on a minute,
yeah?
I mean, I have 3 board meetings that night.
Yeah.
You usually meet. but,
Yeah,
you know,
well, we
you could
put
do
ours
something
off.
like that. Dover meets. and
That's
Wyndham.
Marlboro.
Right.
I'm sorry, Marlboro, and Wyndham.
We're
meets.
Dover, I'm not Marlboro.
You know, I'm sorry, I'm getting old and I got a bunch of boards.
But
Anyway, I'm just saying
meetings
that
that day.
it, you know, it's okay. I can't predict what the reorganization's gonna be in terms of when boards meet, but the beginning, the first week, the first 2 weeks of the month in Wyndham Central is basically constant meetings.
Right.
So why don't you go the last Monday in March,
Yeah,
The last Monday in March is that a,
28th?
that's actually quite promising. Brilliant idea. No, you're gonna
Everyone's
meet
in
anyway?
line.
We're good now, we are, yeah.
You're meeting all the time, right, in Marlboro now?
I can do
who's bringing the jelly beans?
Where do you meet in Marlboro?
Where do we?
Day after
Oh,
Easter.
you mean this group here?
No, we meet, we'll meet between Dover and Wilmington.
No, I got a conflict that night anyway, it's nothing that has to do with,
The 28th.
yeah. It's not a board meeting. But, you know,
All right, so
it's the reality. I'm trying to promote another phase of life regarding singing, and I'm not gonna miss an opportunity to sing with the orchestra, so.
What about the 18th
Good.
of April?
Glad to hear it.
Not April vacation?
yeah, that's vacation week.
How about June?
You can see why I wanted to press on early.
Well,
It's
what
hard and
about
harder
a
to get
Tuesday?
meetings.
Does it have to be a Monday?
Well, the only reason I asked for Mondays is we have a legislator from our group that has to drive back from Montpelier. It's a
Yeah.
long trip, so that's why we were shooting for that.
Mondays are better for me because Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays are usually booked. So what about was it the 11th? Did we look at that?
What's it look like, Stephen?
11th of,
It's early in the month.
It's the NSBA conference in Boston, we've got a whole bunch of board members. You going to that, Laura?
VSBA one?
NSBA, Boston?
I would like to, but I'm not. Maybe next year.
well, Townsend meets, but.
Just trying to get through the first.
It's the only
Friday.
one that's
Well,
local.
Emily can't make it either.
Next year it's in
so-
Denver.
That's the one to go to.
It's because it's in
Okay.
Boston, we're paying for a whole bunch of.
Can we meet on the 18th even though it's vacation week? I mean, I don't get vacation that for this. But,
I have a board meeting.
I may be away.
oh, you have a board meeting? You guys
You have
got a board meeting?
on
Okay, hey,
vacation?
That's fine.
I've just asked my esteemed colleague and successor if the 28th can work of March. It can work.
You live like your personal life in retirement.
I won't be
No, he
here.
won't
You're
be
gonna
here.
say.
He's my designee.
Gotcha,
I will be
right.
the
Works
designee.
for me.
That's good.
Okay, so is that okay with you guys?
Thank you, Steve.
Works.
Thank you. So we'll meet
28th
the
of March.
28th,
Oh, we can use the
6:30
deal
in
with them
Dover.
in.
6:30 in Dover.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that okay with everybody? Holy mackerel, we got a meeting.
Chris, can you help with getting notice out on that for Chum? and-
Yep.
So, did we say 6 or 6:30?
6:30? Does 6:30 work for everybody?
Remind on that? Yes.
Because I know some people have got to get home.
Well, how about Chum? Was he able to make it? Or, you know, he has a late job sometimes or something, or what's happening there, you don't know?
So, yeah, I mean, our meetings with Chum usually are 7, so usually 6:30 is okay. I mean, we'll check with him. Especially if it's in Dover, because he can do it on the way home.
Oh, right, okay.
Stephen, thank you. That was good to set that up. I appreciate that.
Bill wasn't.
No, I
I
meant,
already
but
thanked
Stephen asked Bill to
Thanks,
do
Bill.
that was,
We're lucky to have these three guys here.
Yeah.
No, we were, you know, I don't know whether you noticed, but there is a rapport, and we are a team, you know, that's important.
Anything else? Because we're at our timeline.
good job.
Very good.
I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, good conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Zero.